She thought it was just a dream, until the billionaire's bite on her neck made her tremble again. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't keep staring at him, but she did. Ruby Bailey wiped down the same coffee cup for the third time, her dark brown eyes stealing glances at the man who sat in the corner booth every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 8:47 a.m. Travis Byrne. She didn't know his name yet, but she'd memorized everything else about him. The way his broad shoulders filled out his perfectly tailored navy suit, how his strong jaw tensed whenever he read something on his phone that he didn't like, the way his steel grey eyes seemed to carry the weight of decisions that probably involved more money than she'd see in a lifetime. "Girl, you're going to polish the paint off that mug," laughed Keisha, her co-worker, as she restocked the pastry case. "Just go talk to him already." Ruby shook her head, her natural curls bouncing softly around her shoulders. "He's not here for conversation, Keish. Look at him." And she was right. Travis Byrne sat like a man who existed in a different dimension, one where small talk was a luxury he couldn't afford, and smiles were rationed like precious commodities. His fingers moved across his phone screen with surgical precision, his coffee growing cold while he conducted what Ruby imagined were million-dollar deals. The morning rush was beginning to thin out. The usual suspects had grabbed their caffeine fixes and rushed off to jobs that actually mattered, leaving behind only the lingering scent of espresso and the soft jazz that Ruby had convinced her manager to play instead of the generic pop music. Ruby's grind cafe wasn't much to look at, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, walls painted a warm terracotta that made even the gloomiest Chicago morning feel a little brighter, and plants that Ruby had personally nursed back to health scattered throughout the space. But it was hers, in the only way something could belong to someone who worked there but didn't own it. At 30, Ruby had made peace with certain things. She'd made peace with the fact that her college degree in art history was currently helping her recommend which pastry paired best with a medium roast. She'd made peace with the apartment she shared with her cousin Jasmine and Jasmine's 5-year-old daughter Mia. She'd even made peace with the fact that her last relationship had ended when Marcus decided that finding himself meant finding someone else. What she hadn't made peace with was the way her heart skipped whenever the door chimed and Travis Byrne walked in. "Ruby!" The sharp voice of Mr. Henderson, the cafe owner, cut through her thoughts. "Table 7 needs cleaning, and that businessman in the corner probably wants a refill." Ruby smoothed down her apron, a cheerful yellow one with tiny coffee beans printed on it that Mia had picked out, and grabbed the coffee pot. Her sneakers made soft, squeaking sounds against the worn wooden floor as she approached Travis's table. "More coffee?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Travis looked up from his phone, and for a moment, Ruby forgot how to breathe. Up close, his eyes weren't just grey, they were the color of storm clouds with flecks of silver that seemed to catch the light. A small scar ran through his left eyebrow, softening what would otherwise be a face carved from marble. "Please," he said, his voice deep and measured. There was something about his accent, cultured, expensive, like he'd been educated somewhere that had ivy-covered walls and libraries older than Chicago itself. Ruby poured the coffee, hyper-aware of the way he watched her hands. Her skin was the rich color of caramel, and against the white sleeve of his dress shirt, the contrast was striking. "You changed the music," he said suddenly. Ruby nearly dropped the coffee pot. In 6 months of serving him, this was the first observation he'd made about anything other than his order. Yes, you noticed." Hard not to. Miles Davis is an improvement over whatever they were playing before. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't not a smile either. "You know jazz?" Ruby asked, then immediately felt stupid. Of course he knew jazz. He probably had season tickets to the symphony and owned original vinyl records that cost more than her monthly rent. "My father was a fan." Something shifted in his expression, like a door closing. "Thank you for the coffee." It was a dismissal, gentle but unmistakable. Ruby nodded and started to turn away, but Travis's voice stopped her. "What's your name?" She turned back, surprised. "Ruby. Ruby Bailey." He nodded slowly, as if he were filing the information away somewhere important. Ruby. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, testing how it felt in his mouth, made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with the fact that she'd skipped breakfast. "I should let you get back to your—" She gestured vaguely at his phone. "Work," he finished. "Yes." But he didn't look at his phone. He looked at her, and Ruby felt like she was being seen, really seen, for the first time in months. It was unnerving and thrilling and completely inappropriate considering he was a customer and she was supposed to be professional. "Ruby," Keisha's voice called from behind the counter. "We need you back here." Ruby blinked, the spell broken. "Right. Enjoy your coffee, Mr. Byrne. Travis Byrne." She smiled. A real smile this time, not the practiced customer service one. "Nice to officially meet you, Travis Byrne." As she walked back to the counter, Ruby could feel his eyes on her. It was ridiculous, really. Men like Travis Byrne didn't look at women like her. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. But when she glanced back over her shoulder, he was still watching her, his coffee forgotten on the table. And Ruby Bailey had no idea that this moment, this simple exchange of names over a cup of coffee, was about to change everything she thought she knew about dreams, desire, and the fine line between fantasy and reality. Because in less than 2 weeks, she would wake up in her own bed with his mark on her skin and no memory of how it got there. 3 days had passed since Travis Byrne had spoken her name, and Ruby couldn't stop thinking about the way it sounded in his voice. She was being ridiculous and she knew it. 30-year-old women didn't develop crushes on customers like teenage girls with their first celebrity obsession. But every time the door chimed at 8:47 a.m., her heart did this embarrassing little skip that made her feel like she was 16 again. "You're humming," Jasmine observed from across their tiny kitchen table, while Mia colored happily beside her, and Jasmine tried to eat cereal with one hand. "You never hum before 10 a.m. Ruby paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. She hadn't realized she was humming. "I'm not humming." "Girl, you were humming Ella Fitzgerald. Nobody hums Ella Fitzgerald unless they're thinking about a man." Jasmine grinned, her knowing look making Ruby squirm. "And since you swore off dating after Marcus the Magnificent disappointment, this must be some man." "There's no man," Ruby lied, kissing Mia's forehead and grabbing her jacket. "I'm just having a good week." Jasmine wasn't buying it. "Well, whoever's making my cousin hum jazz standards better be worth it, 'cause you've been floating around here like you're in some kind of movie." Ruby was still thinking about Jasmine's words 20 minutes later as she unlocked the cafe's front door. She wasn't floating, she was being practical, professional. Travis Byrne was a customer who happened to have nice eyes and a voice that made her name sound like poetry. That was all. The morning rush came and went in its usual blur of rushed orders and impatient business people who treated coffee like a life-or-death necessity. Ruby found herself checking the clock every few minutes, though she told herself it had nothing to do with Travis's usual arrival time. At 8:52 a.m., 5 minutes late, he walked in, but something was different. His usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, his normally pristine hair showing signs that he'd run his fingers through it. Dark circles shadowed those storm-grey eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. "The usual?" Ruby asked as he approached the counter, though she was already reaching for his preferred blend. "Actually," Travis paused, and Ruby noticed the way his hands flexed at his sides, like he was fighting some internal battle. "Do you have anything stronger?" Ruby raised an eyebrow. "It's coffee, not whiskey, though I could make you a double shot if you're looking for more caffeine." For the first time since she'd known him, Travis Byrne laughed. It was a short, rusty sound, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "A double shot sounds perfect." As Ruby prepared his order, she could feel him watching her movements. There was something different about his attention today, less distant, more present, like he was actually seeing her instead of looking through her. "Rough night?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Travis accepted the coffee cup, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. Ruby felt that touch all the way to her toes. "Rough few months, actually." He didn't elaborate, but he also didn't walk away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, which was so unlike his usual behavior that Ruby wondered if he was feeling all right. "You know," she said carefully, "I've been serving you coffee for 6 months, and I don't think I've ever seen you actually relax. Do you ever take breaks from whatever it is you do?" "I run an investment firm." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Ruby caught something underneath it. Pride, maybe, but also something that looked suspiciously like exhaustion. "Taking breaks isn't really part of the job description." "Says who?" The question hung between them, simple but loaded. Travis studied her face like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. "You're different from most people I meet," he said finally. "How so?" "Most people hear investment firm and either want something from me or decide I'm not worth their time. You just asked if I take breaks. Ruby felt heat rise in her cheeks. Maybe that's because I don't really know what an investment firm does. For all I know, you could be investing in coffee shops and jazz records. This time, his laugh was fuller, more genuine. If only it were that simple. The morning crowd had thinned out, leaving them in a bubble of relative quiet. Ruby found herself moving closer, drawn by something in his expression that looked almost vulnerable. "Want to know a secret?" she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Travis nodded, and Ruby was struck by how young he looked when he wasn't wearing his businessman mask. "I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. Everyone thinks I'm this cheerful, put-together person who has life figured out, but honestly, I'm mostly just making it up as I go along." "That's not a secret," Travis said softly. "That's just being human." The words hit Ruby harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had made her feel like being imperfect was okay, like struggling didn't make her a failure? "Is that what you are?" she asked. "Human?" It was meant to be a joke, but Travis's expression grew serious. "Some days I'm not sure." The honesty in his voice made Ruby's chest tight. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him that whatever was weighing on him didn't have to be carried alone. But the space between them felt both intimate and infinite, filled with all the reasons why a billionaire investor and a coffee shop girl shouldn't be having this conversation. "For what it's worth," she said instead, "you seem pretty human to me." Travis's eyes locked with hers, and Ruby felt something shift in the air between them. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward would change everything. "Ruby," he started, then stopped, shaking his head. "I should let you get back to work." But he didn't move, neither did she. They stood there, caught in a moment that felt too big for the small space between the counter and the coffee machine. "Mr. Byrne!" The sharp voice cut through their bubble like a knife. A woman in an expensive suit had entered the cafe, her phone pressed to her ear and irritation written across her face. "I've been looking everywhere for you. We have the Morrison meeting in 20 minutes. Travis's mask slipped back into place so quickly that Ruby almost wondered if she'd imagined the vulnerable man who'd been standing there moments before. "Of course. I'll be right there, Angela." He turned back to Ruby, and for just a second, she saw regret flash across his features. "Thank you for the coffee and the conversation." "Any time," Ruby managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Travis left money on the counter, too much money as always, and followed the woman out of the cafe. Ruby watched through the window as they walked toward the gleaming office building next door, Angela talking rapidly, while Travis listened with that same distant expression he always wore in public. But just before he disappeared through the revolving doors, he turned back toward the cafe. Their eyes met through the glass, and Ruby felt her breath catch. In that moment, she realized she was in trouble, real trouble, because Travis Byrne wasn't just a handsome customer anymore. He was becoming something much more dangerous, a man she could fall for, and Ruby Bailey had absolutely no idea what she was going to do about that. The rain started at 3 p.m., and by closing time, Chicago looked like it was trying to wash itself clean. Ruby stood at the cafe's front window, watching sheets of water cascade down the glass while she waited for the last customer to finish his newspaper. The weather matched her mood, restless, charged with electricity, impossible to ignore. She'd been thinking about Travis all day, not just thinking, obsessing. Every time the door chimed, her heart jumped, hoping to see those storm-gray eyes and that perfectly imperfect smile. But 8:47 a.m. had come and gone without him, and Ruby found herself checking her phone more often than usual, as if he might have somehow gotten her number and decided to explain his absence. Which was insane. They'd had one real conversation, one moment of connection that probably meant nothing to a man who likely had moments of connection with board members and business partners, and women who wore designer suits and knew the difference between a merger and an acquisition. "Girl, you're going to wear a hole in that floor," Keisha called from behind the counter, where she was counting the day's receipts. "What's got you pacing like a caged tiger?" "I'm not pacing," Ruby protested, though she immediately stopped moving. And I'm not black," Keisha grinned. "This about that fine businessman who's got you humming jazz standards?" Before Ruby could deny it, the door chimed. Both women looked up, expecting to see someone ducking in from the rain with an umbrella and a desperate need for caffeine. Instead, Travis Byrne stood in the doorway, completely soaked. His expensive suit clung to his frame like a second skin. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and water dripped from his clothes onto the cafe's wooden floor. He looked like he'd walked straight through the storm without caring about the consequences. We're about to close, Keisha said automatically, but her voice was gentle. Nobody looked at a man that soaked and turned him away. Travis's eyes found Ruby's across the cafe. I was hoping I could get one more coffee, and maybe... He paused, water still dripping from his hair. Maybe somewhere to wait out the storm. Ruby felt her heart do that ridiculous skip again. Of course. Keisha, you can head out early if you want. I'll close up. Keisha raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. She'd been wanting to leave early all week, and Ruby had just handed her the perfect excuse. You sure? Positive. After Keisha gathered her things and left with a knowing smile that made Ruby's cheeks warm, the cafe fell into intimate quiet. Just Ruby, Travis, and the sound of rain against the windows. You're going to catch pneumonia, Ruby said, grabbing a clean towel from behind the counter. Here. Travis accepted the towel gratefully, running it through his hair and over his face. The simple action was somehow more intimate than it should have been, and Ruby found herself staring at the way his wet shirt clung to his chest. Thank you. His voice was rougher than usual. Whether from the cold or something else, Ruby couldn't tell. I was in meetings all day, and when I finally got out, he gestured toward the window. Let's just say my driver wasn't expecting the weather to turn this quickly. Where's your car now? Stuck in traffic about 6 blocks away. I told him to go home. I'll catch a cab when the rain lets up. Ruby glanced at the weather outside. The storm showed no signs of stopping anytime soon. That could be hours. I know. Travis met her gaze, and something in his expression made Ruby's breath catch. Is that okay? The question hung between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with waiting out the rain. Ruby nodded, not trusting her voice. She busied herself making coffee, hyper-aware of Travis's presence as he explored the cafe's small space. She'd seen him here dozens of times, but always seated, always focused on his phone. Now he moved through the room like he was seeing it for the first time, touching the spines of the books on the community shelf, studying the local artwork on the walls. You did this, he said. It wasn't a question. Ruby looked up from the coffee machine. Did what? This. He gestured around the cafe. The music, the books, the plants, the way everything feels warm. This isn't how the place looked 6 months ago. Ruby felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had been slowly transforming the cafe, one small change at a time. A plant here, a bookshelf there, convincing Mr. Henderson to let her repaint one accent wall. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed. Mr. Henderson lets me make suggestions, she said carefully. It's beautiful. Travis's voice was soft, sincere. It feels like home. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Ruby handed him the coffee, their fingers brushing as he accepted the mug. This time, neither of them pulled away immediately. When was the last time you felt at home somewhere? Ruby asked before she could stop herself. Travis was quiet for so long that Ruby thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not sure I ever have. The admission hit Ruby like a physical blow. She looked at this man, wealthy, successful, powerful, and saw something she recognized. Loneliness so deep it had become part of his foundation. What about when you were a kid? She pressed gently. Travis's laugh was hollow. My father believed that comfort made people weak. Home was wherever he decided we needed to be for business. Hotels, corporate apartments, other people's houses when he was courting investors. I went to boarding school from the time I was 8. 8? Ruby's heart clenched. That's so young. It was practical. My mother died when I was 7, and my father wasn't exactly the nurturing type. He said school would teach me discipline, make me strong. Travis stared into his coffee. I guess it worked. Ruby set down her own mug and moved closer, drawn by an impulse she couldn't name. Or maybe it just taught you to be alone. Their eyes met, and Ruby saw something crack in Travis's carefully constructed armor. For a moment, he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent most of his life building walls so high that he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone climb them. I'm sorry, she said softly. No child should grow up feeling like they don't belong anywhere. It's fine, Travis said automatically, but his voice betrayed him. It was a long time ago. Some things don't stop hurting just because they happened a long time ago. The words seemed to hit him harder than she'd expected. Travis set down his coffee and ran a hand through his still damp hair, and Ruby could practically see him fighting against emotions he'd spent decades learning to suppress. How do you do that? He asked. Do what? See right through me. Most people look at me and see the suit, the money, the success. You look at me and see... He trailed off, shaking his head. I see you, Ruby said simply. Just you. The rain continued to pound against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Travis stepped closer, close enough that Ruby could smell his cologne mixed with the clean scent of rain. "Ruby," he said, her name a question and a plea all at once. She looked up at him, this beautiful, broken man, who'd somehow found his way into her heart without her permission, and for the first time in months, Ruby felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But just as Travis reached up to touch her face, his phone buzzed against the counter where he'd set it. The sound shattered the moment like glass, and Ruby watched as his expression shifted, walls sliding back into place. He glanced at the screen and cursed softly. "I have to take this." "Of course," Ruby said, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. As Travis stepped away to answer his phone, Ruby realized that the rain outside wasn't the only storm she needed to worry about. The one building inside her heart was going to be much harder to weather. The phone call changed everything, and Ruby knew it before Travis even hung up. She watched him pace near the window, his voice low and clipped as he spoke in a language she was beginning to recognize, corporate speak, full of mergers and acquisitions and numbers that meant more than most people's entire lives. His free hand gestured sharply as he talked, and Ruby could see the exact moment when the vulnerable man who'd shared his childhood pain disappeared, replaced by the businessman who controlled millions of dollars with a single decision. When he finally ended the call, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I should go," Travis said, not meeting her eyes. "The rain's letting up and I have an early meeting tomorrow." Ruby's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course." He gathered his things with efficient movements, the same way he did everything, controlled, purposeful, distant. But as he reached for his jacket, Ruby noticed his hands weren't quite steady. "Travis," she said softly. He stopped, his back still turned to her. "Whatever that call was about, now you don't have to carry it alone." For a moment she thought he might turn around, might let her back into that space where his walls had cracked. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and headed for the door. "Thank you for the coffee, Ruby, and for—" He paused, hand on the door handle, "for listening." Then he was gone, leaving Ruby alone with the lingering scent of his cologne and the echo of rain against glass. The next morning came too soon and too slowly all at once. Ruby arrived at the cafe early, telling herself it had nothing to do with Travis's usual 8:47 a.m. arrival time. She just wanted to get a head start on inventory. That was all. At 8:30 she started glancing at the clock. At 8:45 she caught herself rearranging the pastry display for the third time. At 9:15 she finally admitted to herself that he wasn't coming. "Waiting for someone?" Keisha asked, sliding up beside her with a knowing smile. "No," Ruby lied. "Just watching the morning rush." "Mm-hmm. And I suppose you've been checking that clock every 30 seconds because you're really interested in time management." Ruby sighed. "He's not coming." "Who's not coming?" "The businessman, Travis." His name felt strange on her tongue when she said it to someone else. "He was here yesterday during the storm, and we talked, and I thought—" She shook her head. "I thought maybe something was changing." Keisha studied her friend's face with the expertise of someone who'd known Ruby since high school. "What happened?" "He got a phone call. Work stuff. And just like that, he was gone. Not just physically gone, completely gone. Like the person I'd been talking to never existed." "Honey," Keisha said gently, "some people got walls so high they can't even see over them anymore. Doesn't mean what you saw wasn't real, just means he's scared." Before Ruby could respond, the door chimed. Both women looked up hopefully, but it was just Mrs. Patterson, their regular Tuesday customer, who always ordered a decaf latte and complained about the weather. The day dragged on with unusual slowness. Ruby found herself distracted, making mistakes she never made, putting sugar in coffee for customers who asked for it black, forgetting to charge for extra shots, staring out the window at nothing. By the time evening rolled around, she was exhausted from pretending she wasn't disappointed. She was locking up the cafe when she heard footsteps behind her. "We're closed," she called without turning around, fumbling with the keys in the growing darkness. "I know." Ruby's heart stopped. She turned slowly to find Travis standing a few feet away, and this time he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent all day fighting an internal war and had finally decided to surrender. "I owe you an apology," he said. Ruby crossed her arms, partly to protect herself from the cool evening air and partly to keep from reaching for him. "For what? For running away yesterday? For not coming in this morning? For being a coward?" He stepped closer, and Ruby could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "That phone call, it was about a deal I've been working on for months. An acquisition that could make or break the company. And when I heard it was falling apart, all I could think about was getting back to work, fixing it, controlling something I could actually control. And you couldn't control whatever was happening between us, Ruby said quietly. Travis's smile was rueful. Ruby, I can't even begin to control what you do to me, and that terrifies me more than any business deal ever could. The admission hung between them, honest and raw. Ruby felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to crumble. I've spent my entire life building walls, Travis continued, keeping people at a distance because distance is safe. Distance means no one can hurt you, and no one can leave. But yesterday, when you looked at me like you could see straight through to my soul, I realized I don't want distance from you. Ruby's breath caught. What do you want? Travis stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. I want to know what makes you laugh at 2 a.m. I want to know why you chose jazz over pop music and whether you sing in the shower. I want to know what you dream about and what keeps you awake at night. Travis. Ruby's voice was barely a whisper. I want to know if you feel this too, he said, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. This thing between us that makes it hard to breathe when you're close and impossible to think when you're not. Ruby leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed. I feel it. Then let me take you to dinner. Somewhere quiet where we can talk without interruptions or phone calls or the rest of the world demanding our attention. Ruby opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. I don't think I'm dressed for wherever you usually eat dinner. Travis's gaze swept over her. Worn jeans, simple sweater, sneakers that had seen better days, and his smile was soft, genuine. You're perfect exactly as you are. I know a place. An hour later, Ruby found herself in a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy that she'd walked past hundreds of times but never entered. It was the kind of place where the owner knew every customer's name, and the wine list was written in chalk on a board behind the bar. Travis had traded his business suit for dark jeans and a button-down shirt that made his storm-gray eyes look softer, warmer. Without the armor of expensive clothing, he looked younger, more approachable, more real. This isn't what I expected, Ruby admitted, as they settled into a corner booth. What did you expect? White tablecloths and waiters with French accents? Ruby laughed. Something like that. I save those places for business dinners. He gestured around the cozy restaurant where families shared plates of pasta and couples held hands over flickering candles. This is where I come when I want to remember what normal feels like. The conversation flowed easier than Ruby had expected. Travis told her about growing up in boarding schools, but finding solace in libraries. Ruby shared stories about Mia's latest artistic masterpieces and Jasmine's ongoing disaster with online dating. They talked about books and music and the way Chicago looked different in winter than any other time of year. But it was the things they didn't say that charged the air between them. The way Travis's fingers brushed hers when he reached for the wine. The way Ruby's breath caught when he leaned closer to hear her over the restaurant's gentle din. The way they both lingered over dessert, neither wanting the evening to end. I should get you home, Travis said finally, though his voice suggested it was the last thing he wanted to do. Ruby nodded, though her heart protested. It's getting late. They walked slowly to his car, the Chicago night crisp around them. When they reached her apartment building, Travis walked her to the front door like a gentleman from another era. Thank you, Ruby said, for dinner, for tonight. Thank you for giving me a second chance after I acted like an ass. They stood facing each other in the soft glow of the building's security lights, and Ruby could feel the moment stretching, charged with possibility. Ruby, Travis said softly. Yes? I meant what I said earlier, about wanting to know everything about you. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. And I meant what I said about feeling this too. Travis stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face again. May I kiss you? Ruby's answer was to rise up on her toes and meet him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But when Ruby's hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer, Travis deepened the kiss and Ruby felt the world tilt on its axis. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Travis rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he whispered, though he made no move to leave. I should, Ruby agreed, though her hands were still tangled in his shirt, but neither of them moved, caught in the space between what they should do and what they desperately wanted to do, and Ruby had no idea that this kiss, this perfect, earth-shattering kiss, was only the beginning of a night that would change everything she thought she knew about desire, dreams, and the fine line between both. Ruby couldn't sleep. She'd been lying in bed for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening. The way Travis had looked at her across the dinner table, the warmth of his hand against her cheek, the way the world had seemed to stop spinning when he kissed her. Her fingers drifted to her lips, still tender from his touch. She could still taste him. Wine and mint and something that was uniquely Travis. Could still feel the way his hands had tangled in her hair, the way his body had pressed against hers in the doorway. A soft knock at the apartment's front door made her heart skip. Ruby glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Jasmine was working the night shift at the hospital, and Mia was fast asleep in the next room. Nobody knocked on their door this late unless something was wrong. She slipped out of bed, pulling on a robe over her silk pajamas, a splurge from last Christmas that she'd never expected anyone to see. The knocking came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. Ruby peered through the peephole and felt her world tilt. Travis stood in the hallway, no longer the composed businessman or even the charming dinner companion. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. His shirt was untucked, and there was something almost desperate in his posture. Ruby's hands trembled as she undid the locks. "Travis, what are you—" "I couldn't stay away," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I tried. I drove home, I took a shower, I told myself this was moving too fast, but I couldn't stop thinking about you, about the way you felt in my arms, about how right everything feels when I'm with you." Ruby's breath caught. In the dim hallway light, Travis looked like a man on the edge of losing control, and Ruby realized she wanted to be the one to push him over. "I couldn't sleep either," she admitted. Travis's eyes darkened. "Ruby, if I come in there, I don't think I'll be able to leave tonight." The words hung between them, a promise and a warning all at once. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped back, opening the door wider. "Then don't leave," she whispered. Travis was across the threshold and gathering her into his arms before Ruby could take another breath. This kiss was nothing like the gentle one they'd shared outside. This was hunger and need, and months of suppressed desire finally breaking free. Ruby melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he backed her against the closed door. When his lips trailed down her neck, she bit back a moan, hyper-aware that Mia was sleeping just down the hall. "Not here," she breathed, taking his hand and leading him to her bedroom. Ruby's room was small and simple. A double bed covered in soft white linens, a dresser she'd painted herself, and fairy lights strung around the window that cast everything in a warm, dreamlike glow. Travis took it in with the same attention he'd given the cafe, as if he were memorizing every detail. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hands framing her face. "Because once we cross this line, Ruby, there's no going back for me. You'll be in my blood, in my soul, in every breath I take." Ruby's answer was to reach up and slowly unbutton his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly as she revealed the expanse of his chest. Travis was beautiful, all lean muscle and warm skin, with a small scar near his collarbone that she wanted to kiss. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." Travis's control snapped. He lifted Ruby in his arms, carrying her to the bed with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the fire in his eyes. He laid her down like she was something precious, something to be treasured. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his hands skimming over the silk of her pajamas. "I've imagined this so many times, but reality is so much better." Ruby arched beneath his touch, her body responding to him in ways that should have embarrassed her, but somehow felt completely natural. This was Travis, the man who'd seen through her defenses, who'd shared his deepest vulnerabilities, who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd never known how to ask. When he kissed her again, deeper this time, Ruby felt herself drowning in sensation. The taste of him, the weight of his body against hers, the way his hands seemed to know exactly where to touch to make her gasp. Time seemed to slow and speed up simultaneously, each moment stretching into eternity, while the night flew by in a blur of whispered words and desperate touches. Travis worshipped her body with a patience that drove her wild, mapping every curve and hollow, with his lips and hands, until Ruby was trembling beneath him, her fingers digging into his shoulders as she fought for control. "Let go," he whispered against her ear, his voice sending shivers down her spine. "Let me take care of you." When Travis finally claimed her completely, Ruby cried out softly, her back arching as pleasure crashed over her in waves. Travis buried his face in her neck, his own control fracturing as they moved together in a rhythm as old as time itself. In the heat of passion, When Ruby was lost to everything but the feel of Travis above her, around her, inside her, she felt his teeth graze her neck. The bite was gentle but possessive, marking her as his in the most primal way possible. The sensation sent her spiraling over the edge, Travis's name falling from her lips like a prayer. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the fairy light glow, both breathing hard. Travis traced lazy patterns on Ruby's bare shoulder, while she listened to the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "That was—" Ruby started, then trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Perfect," Travis said softly. "Absolutely perfect." Ruby smiled, feeling drowsy and sated and more content than she'd been in years. Travis's arms tightened around her, and she could feel him pressing soft kisses to the top of her head. "Stay," she whispered, though her eyes were already drifting closed. "Always," he murmured back, and Ruby fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat and the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. But when she woke the next morning, sunlight streaming through her windows and Mia's laughter echoing from the kitchen, Ruby was alone. Her bed was perfectly made, as if no one had ever shared it. Her silk pajamas were neatly folded on the dresser, though she had no memory of taking them off or putting them there. The fairy lights around her window were still on, but they looked different in the harsh morning light, less magical, more ordinary. Ruby sat up slowly, her head spinning. Had it been a dream? It had felt so real. Every touch, every whispered word, every moment of earth-shattering pleasure. But dreams could feel real, couldn't they? Especially dreams about things you wanted desperately to happen. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and trying to make sense of the fragments of memory that felt both crystal clear and impossibly hazy. In the mirror, her reflection looked exactly the same as always. No signs of a night of passion, no evidence that her world had been turned upside down. Until she turned her head and saw it. There, on the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder, was a small purple mark, a bite mark. Ruby's knees went weak. She gripped the bathroom counter, staring at her reflection in shock. It hadn't been a dream. Travis had been here, in her bed, in her arms. The night had been real, every incredible, impossible moment of it. But if it was real, where was he? And why couldn't she remember how the night had ended? Ruby touched the mark gently, and her body responded with an echo of the pleasure she'd felt the night before. Her skin seemed to remember his touch, even if her mind was struggling to piece together the details. "Aunt Ruby!" Mia's voice called from the kitchen. "Mama made pancakes." Ruby forced herself to move, to get dressed, to act normal even though nothing would ever be normal again. Because she had proof now, physical proof that the most incredible night of her life hadn't been a dream. The question was, what did she do about it? And more importantly, when she saw Travis again, would he remember it too? Or would he look at her with those same polite, distant eyes, leaving her to wonder if she was slowly losing her mind? Ruby touched the mark on her neck one more time and made a decision. She was going to find out. Ruby spent the entire morning touching her neck. It was ridiculous, really. Every few minutes, her fingers would drift to the small purple mark hidden beneath the collar of her work shirt, as if she needed constant proof that the night before hadn't been some elaborate fantasy conjured by her lonely heart. But the mark was real, tender to the touch, undeniably present, impossible to explain away as anything other than what it was. Evidence that Travis Byrne had been in her bed, had made love to her with a passion that still made her knees weak to remember. "You're distracted today," Keisha observed, sliding up beside Ruby as she fumbled with the espresso machine for the third time in 10 minutes. "And you keep touching your neck like you got a rash or something." Ruby's hand immediately dropped to her side. "I'm fine." Keisha's knowing look suggested she wasn't buying it. "This wouldn't have anything to do with why you're wearing a turtleneck in 60-degree weather, would it?" Heat flooded Ruby's cheeks. "It's not a turtleneck. It's a mock neck. Girl, call it whatever you want, but I've known you for 15 years and you don't wear high-necked anything unless you're hiding something." Keisha grinned. "So what happened? And please tell me it involved that fine businessman who's been making you act like a teenager with her first crush." Before Ruby could deflect, the cafe door chimed with its familiar melody. Both women turned toward the sound, and Ruby's heart stopped. Travis Byrne stood in the doorway looking every inch the polished businessman in his charcoal suit and silver tie. But there was something different about him today. A tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that suggested he'd slept about as well as Ruby had. Their eyes met across the cafe, and Ruby felt the world tilt. Did he remember? Would he acknowledge what had happened between them? Or would he pretend it was just another Tuesday morning? Travis approached the counter with his usual measured stride, but Ruby noticed the way his gaze lingered on her face, searching for something she couldn't identify. "Good morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Morning," Ruby managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. "The usual? Please." Ruby busied herself with his coffee, hyper-aware of Travis's presence and Keisha's curious stare. When their fingers brushed as she handed him the cup, Ruby felt a jolt of electricity that confirmed beyond any doubt that the night before had been real. Travis's sharp intake of breath suggested he felt it too. "Ruby," he said quietly, then stopped, glancing meaningfully at Keisha. "I'll just go check on the pastry situation," Keisha said with obvious reluctance, disappearing into the back room but probably pressing her ear to the door. Travis waited until they were alone before speaking again. "About last night, did it happen?" Ruby interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I need to know. Did it really happen, or am I losing my mind?" Something shifted in Travis's expression, surprise, relief, something that looked like gratitude. "You remember." Pieces, fragments, like trying to remember a dream, except... Ruby's hand drifted unconsciously toward her neck before she caught herself. "Except dreams don't leave marks." Travis's eyes darkened, following the movement of her hand. "No, they don't." "So it was real? All of it? Every moment?" Travis said softly. "Every touch, every kiss, every..." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to where Ruby's collar hid the evidence of his passion. Relief flooded through Ruby so powerfully that she had to grip the counter for support. "Then why do I feel like I'm going crazy? Why can't I remember leaving, or you leaving, or how the night ended?" "Because you fell asleep in my arms," Travis said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I didn't want to wake you. You looked so peaceful, so beautiful. So I stayed until just before dawn watching you sleep, memorizing every detail. You left before I woke up. It wasn't a question. I had to. Your roommate was coming home from her shift, and your niece would be waking up soon. I didn't want to complicate things for you." Ruby felt a stab of disappointment mixed with understanding. Of course he'd been thinking of her reputation, her family situation. It was considerate and practical, and everything she should appreciate. "So why did it hurt?" "I see," she said carefully. "No, you don't." Travis leaned closer, his voice urgent. "Ruby, leaving you that morning was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I also wanted to do this right, to talk to you properly, to make sure you didn't regret what happened between us." "Do you regret it?" The question hung between them, vulnerable and necessary. Travis's answer came without hesitation. "Never. Not a single moment." His eyes searched hers. "Do you?" Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. "No, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of how you make me feel." Ruby's voice dropped to a whisper. "Of what happens next." Travis reached across the counter, his fingers finding hers and intertwining gently. "What happens next is whatever we want to happen. But Ruby, I need you to know, last night wasn't just physical for me. It wasn't just desire or attraction or whatever you want to call it. What was it?" "It was falling in love," Travis said simply. "Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love." Ruby's breath caught. She stared at him, this beautiful, complicated man who'd somehow seen past all her defenses to the woman she'd forgotten she could be. "Travis," she whispered, "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other's favorite colors or middle names or any of the things people are supposed to know before they fall in love." Travis's thumb stroked over her knuckles. "But I know how you taste like coffee and cinnamon. I know you make these little sounds when you're lost in pleasure that drive me absolutely wild. I know you feel like home in my arms." Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. "This is insane." "The best things usually are." Before Ruby could respond, the back door chimed, and Keisha emerged with impeccable timing and a knowing grin. "Everything okay out here?" she asked innocently. Travis straightened, releasing Ruby's hand but not stepping back. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with Ruby privately. Would it be possible for her to take a break?" Keisha's grin widened. "Honey, take all the time you need. I can handle the morning rush." Ruby felt her cheeks warm, but she untied her apron anyway. "Just give me 5 minutes." "I'll wait," Travis said. Ruby ducked into the back room to grab her jacket, her mind racing. Travis was in love with her. He'd said the words she'd been afraid to even think, let alone hope for. And the terrifying part was that she felt the same way, had been falling for him since the first time he'd smiled at her, had been lost completely, since the moment he'd kissed her. When she emerged, Travis was standing by the window, staring out at the Chicago street with an expression she couldn't read. "Ready?" he asked. Ruby nodded, and they stepped out into the crisp morning air. Travis guided her to a small park across the street, where a few early joggers and dog walkers provided cover for their conversation. "There's something else," Travis said, as they settled on a bench beneath a maple tree, just beginning to turn autumn colors. "Something I should have told you last night." Ruby's stomach clenched. "What?" Travis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "I left this for you, on the counter at the cafe. I wanted you to know that what happened between us meant something to me." Ruby unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. Written in Travis's precise handwriting were the words, "I hope it was as real for you as it was for me, TB." "I never saw this," Ruby said, confusion clouding her voice. "When I got to work this morning, there was nothing on the counter." Travis frowned. "I left it right by the register. Maybe someone moved it or it fell." "No." Ruby's voice was firm. "I would have seen it. I always check the counter first thing." She looked up at him, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "Travis, what time did you leave the note?" "Around 5:30, just before I left." "And what time do you think I got to work?" "I don't know." 8? 8:15. Ruby shook her head. "I got here at 6:45. I'm always early on Tuesdays because we get the delivery." She stared at the note in her hands. "Someone took this. Someone who got here before me." Travis's expression darkened. "Who has keys to the cafe?" "Me, Keisha, Mr. Henderson." Ruby's voice trailed off as a terrible thought occurred to her. "And the cleaning crew. They come in at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays." "Ruby," Travis said carefully, "is there anyone who might not want us to be together? Anyone who might have a reason to interfere?" Ruby's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. "What is it?" Travis asked, alarmed. Ruby held up her phone with a shaking hand. The message was from an unknown number, but the words made her stomach turn. "Some dreams are better left as dreams. Stay away from what doesn't belong to you." Travis read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with anger. "Someone's threatening you." "But who? And why?" Ruby's voice was small, scared. Travis pulled her closer, his arm protective around her shoulders. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." As they sat together on the park bench, the autumn wind picking up around them, Ruby realized that her fairy tale romance had just taken a very dark turn, and somewhere in the back of her mind a voice whispered that maybe some dreams really were too good to be true. Ruby couldn't focus on anything except the feeling that someone was watching her. It had been 3 days since the threatening text message, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every customer who lingered too long made her nervous. Every unexpected sound made her jump. Travis had insisted on having his security team investigate, but so far they'd found nothing. No fingerprints on the note he'd left, no way to trace the anonymous number, no evidence of who might want to keep them apart. "You're being paranoid," Jasmine said for the 3rd time that week, bouncing Mia on her hip while Ruby paced their small living room. "Maybe it was just some random person trying to mess with you. A prank." "A prank?" Ruby stopped pacing and stared at her cousin. "Jazz, someone broke into the cafe and stole a personal note. That's not a prank, that's..." She struggled for the right word. "That's stalking. Or maybe your boyfriend just thinks he left a note and didn't actually leave one. Maybe he dreamed it." Jasmine's tone was gentle but skeptical. "Honey, you've been through a lot lately. Marcus really did a number on your trust. And now you're with this rich guy who probably has all kinds of complicated drama." "This isn't about Marcus," Ruby interrupted, though she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. "And Travis isn't. He's not like that." But even as she said it, Ruby felt a seed of doubt plant itself in her mind. How well did she really know Travis? They'd had a handful of conversations, one incredible dinner, and one night of passion that still made her body hum with remembered pleasure. But did she know him well enough to trust him completely? The sound of her phone buzzing made her jump. Ruby looked at the screen and felt relief wash over her when she saw Travis's name. "Hey," she answered, trying to keep her voice light. "Are you at home?" Travis's voice was tense, urgent. "Yes. Why?" "Stay there. Lock the doors, I'm coming over." Ruby's heart rate spiked. "Travis, what's wrong?" "I'll explain when I get there. Just, please stay inside and don't open the door for anyone but me." The line went dead, leaving Ruby staring at her phone with growing alarm. What was that about? Jasmine asked, noticing Ruby's pale expression. I don't know. He sounded scared. Ruby moved to the window, peering down at the street below. Everything looked normal. Cars parked along the curb, a few people walking their dogs, Mrs. Chen from downstairs watering her plants on the fire escape. 20 minutes later, Travis knocked on their door with a specific pattern, 3 short, 2 long, that he'd texted her beforehand. When Ruby opened the door, he looked like he'd been running his hands through his hair for hours, his usually perfect appearance disheveled with worry. Thank God you're okay, he said, pulling her into his arms and holding her tight. Ruby breathed in his familiar scent, expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him, and felt some of her anxiety ease. What happened? Travis glanced at Jasmine, who was watching them with obvious curiosity, while pretending to be absorbed in coloring with Mia. Can we talk privately? He asked. Ruby led him to her bedroom, closing the door behind them. Travis immediately went to the window, checking the locks and peering down at the street. You're scaring me, Ruby said. Travis turned to face her, his expression grim. My security team found something. The person who sent you that text message, they've been watching you for weeks. Ruby's legs went weak. She sank onto the edge of her bed, staring at him. What do you mean, watching me? They have photos, Ruby. Pictures of you leaving your apartment, going to work, grocery shopping. Pictures of us together at dinner. Travis's jaw clenched with barely controlled anger. Whoever this is, they've been stalking you since before we even spoke to each other. The room seemed to spin around Ruby. That's impossible. Why would someone... I don't understand. I'm nobody. I serve coffee for a living. You're not nobody, Travis said fiercely, moving to kneel in front of her and taking her hands in his. But you're right that this doesn't make sense. Unless what? Travis was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Unless this is about me, about my company, my family, my money. Ruby felt something cold settle in her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that there are people who would use anything, anyone, to get to me. Business rivals, competitors, people who want to see me fail or hurt or distracted. Travis's hands tightened on hers. I'm saying that being with me might have put you in danger. The words hit Ruby like a physical blow. She pulled her hands free and stood up, moving away from him. So this is my fault for getting involved with you? No, Travis said quickly, rising to his feet. God, no, this is my fault for not thinking about the consequences, for not protecting you better, for being selfish enough to pursue you when I should have stayed away. Should have stayed away? Ruby's voice rose, and she fought to keep it down so Jasmine wouldn't hear. Is that what you think? That you should have stayed away from me? I think, Travis said carefully, that I should have been honest with you from the beginning about what being with me might mean, about the kind of attention it might bring, the kind of people who might see you as a weakness to exploit. Ruby stared at him, feeling something fragile breaking inside her chest. A weakness to exploit. Is that what I am to you? You know that's not what I meant. Do I? Ruby crossed her arms, suddenly feeling exposed in her own bedroom. Because right now it sounds like you're saying that I'm some kind of liability. Some poor little coffee shop girl who can't handle the big bad world of wealthy businessmen. Travis's expression shifted, frustration replacing concern. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm trying to protect you. By what? By leaving? By deciding what's best for me without asking my opinion? Ruby's voice was getting louder despite her efforts. I'm 30 years old, Travis. I can make my own decisions about what risks I'm willing to take. Can you? Travis shot back. Because 3 days ago you didn't even know this kind of threat existed. You don't understand what these people are capable of. These people? Ruby felt her temper flare. How you mean people like you? The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Travis's face went very still. I see, he said quietly. No, you don't see, Ruby said, immediately regretting her words, but too hurt and scared to take them back. You see a problem to be solved, a complication to be managed. You don't see me. I see you, Travis said, his voice dangerously low. I see a woman I'm falling in love with who's being threatened because of me. I see someone I care about more than my own life, who could be hurt because I was stupid enough to think I could have something normal, something real. Something normal? Ruby laughed, but there was no humor in it. There's nothing normal about any of this, Travis. Rich men don't fall in love with coffee shop girls in real life. They have flings, they have fun, they move on to someone more appropriate. Travis's eyes flashed with anger. Is that really what you think? That this is just some kind of game for me, some rich boy fantasy? I don't know what to think anymore, Ruby admitted, her anger deflating into exhaustion. 3 days ago I thought I was living in a fairy tale. Now I find out I'm being stalked by people who want to hurt me because I had the audacity to care about you. Ruby, maybe they're right, she said quietly. Maybe some dreams are better left as dreams. The silence that followed was deafening. Travis stared at her for a long moment, and Ruby watched as his expression shuttered, walls sliding back into place with practiced efficiency. If that's what you want, he said finally. If you want me to walk away and pretend none of this happened, I will. Ruby's heart clenched, but pride and fear held her tongue. She wanted to take it back, wanted to throw herself into his arms and tell him that they could face anything together. But the thought of living in constant fear, of always looking over her shoulder, of putting Jasmine and Mia at risk, maybe that would be for the best, she heard herself say. Travis nodded once, sharp and final. I'll have my security team continue monitoring the situation until we're sure the threat has passed. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Travis, take care of yourself, Ruby, he said, moving toward the door. And if anything happens, anything at all, call me immediately. Promise me that much. Ruby nodded, not trusting her voice. Travis paused at the door, his hand on the handle. For a moment, Ruby thought he might turn around, might fight for them the way she desperately wanted him to. Instead, he opened the door and walked out of her room, out of her apartment, and quite possibly out of her life. Ruby sank onto her bed, staring at the closed door and wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Outside her window, hidden in the shadows across the street, someone lowered a camera and smiled. Phase 1 was complete. Ruby had never realized how loud silence could be. It had been a week since Travis walked out of her apartment, and the absence of his presence felt like a physical ache that followed her everywhere. No more 8:47 a.m. visits to the cafe. No more storm-gray eyes searching hers across the counter. No more butterflies in her stomach when the door chimed, with the possibility of seeing him. Just silence, and the growing certainty that she'd made the worst mistake of her life. You look terrible, Keisha said bluntly, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to Ruby during the Tuesday morning lull. When's the last time you actually slept? Ruby accepted the coffee gratefully, though she doubted more caffeine would help the exhaustion that seemed to have settled into her bones. I sleep. Staring at the ceiling for 3 hours doesn't count as sleeping. Keisha studied her friend's face with concern. Honey, you've got to stop punishing yourself. If you miss him this much, call him. I can't. Ruby's voice was barely above a whisper. You didn't hear the things I said to him, Keish. I basically accused him of slumming it with the poor girl for entertainment. Did you mean it? No, Ruby said immediately. God, no. But I was scared and hurt and... She trailed off, staring into her coffee cup. I was looking for a reason to push him away before he could leave me the way Marcus did. So you left him first. I guess I did. Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. And now, he probably thinks I never cared about him at all. Before Keisha could respond, the cafe door chimed. Both women looked up hopefully, but instead of Travis, a woman in an expensive business suit entered. She was tall, blonde, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder if she belonged somewhere. Ruby Bailey? The woman asked, approaching the counter. Ruby's stomach clenched with immediate wariness. Yes, my name is Catherine Walsh. I work for Byrne Investments. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Ruby felt Keisha move closer, a protective instinct that Ruby appreciated more than she could say. What kind of conversation? A private one, if possible. Catherine glanced meaningfully at Keisha. Perhaps we could step outside. Every instinct Ruby had screamed danger, but her curiosity about Travis overrode her caution. Keisha, can you handle things for a few minutes? You sure about this? Keisha's voice was skeptical. Ruby nodded, though she wasn't sure at all. Catherine led her to a sleek black car parked across the street. Ruby noticed the driver didn't get out, didn't even look in their direction. Professional. I'll be direct, Catherine said once they were standing beside the car. Mr. Byrne is a valuable asset to our company, and his recent distraction has been noticed by the board. Distraction? Ruby's voice was carefully neutral, though anger was beginning to simmer beneath the surface. You, Ms. Bailey, your relationship with Travis has affected his judgment, his focus, his decision-making. The Morrison deal, worth over $200 million, fell through because Travis was too preoccupied to handle the negotiations properly. Ruby felt like she'd been slapped. I don't know anything about business deals. No, you don't, Catherine agreed smoothly. But you know about distractions, and Travis Byrne cannot afford distractions right now. What exactly are you asking me to do? Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Stay away from him, permanently. In exchange, we're prepared to offer you a significant sum to relocate, start fresh somewhere else, maybe go back to school, pursue that art history degree you never used. Ruby stared at the envelope, feeling sick. You've been investigating me. We investigate anyone who becomes involved with our executives. It's standard practice. Catherine's tone was matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. The offer is generous, Ms. Bailey. More money than you'd make in 5 years at the cafe. And if I refuse, Catherine's smile turned cold, then we'll have to explore other options. Your roommate works at Chicago General, doesn't she? Night shift nurse. It would be unfortunate if her employment became complicated. And your young niece attends Lincoln Elementary. Such a shame when budget cuts force schools to reduce their art programs. The threats were delivered with such casual elegance that it took Ruby a moment to process what she was hearing. When she did, rage flooded through her so powerfully that her hands shook. You're threatening my family. I'm explaining consequences, Catherine corrected. Travis Byrne is worth billions of dollars to this company. You're worth nothing. The math is quite simple. Ruby looked at the envelope in Catherine's manicured hands and felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't about love or heartbreak or even fear anymore. This was about someone thinking they could buy her, threaten her family, and control her life because she had the audacity to fall in love with the wrong man. Keep your money, Ruby said quietly. Catherine's eyebrows rose in surprise. Excuse me. I said keep your money. Ruby's voice was steadier now, powered by a fury that burned cold and bright. And stay away from my family. Ms. Bailey, I don't think you understand. No, I understand perfectly. Ruby stepped closer and Catherine actually took a step back. You think because I work in a coffee shop and live in a small apartment that I don't have any power. But you're wrong. Ruby, you want to know what I'm going to do? Ruby continued, her voice gaining strength. I'm going to walk back into that cafe, and I'm going to call Travis, and I'm going to tell him exactly what kind of people work for his company, and then we're going to figure out together whether you're acting on behalf of the board or if you're the one who's been stalking me. Catherine's carefully composed expression cracked, just for a moment, but it was enough. Ruby saw fear flash across the woman's face, and suddenly everything clicked into place. It's you, Ruby breathed. You're the one who took the note, who sent the threatening text, who's been watching me. You're being paranoid. Am I? Ruby pulled out her phone. Because I'm betting if I call the police right now and tell them about the photos Travis's security team found, they might be very interested in searching your car, your office, your computer. Catherine's mask slipped completely. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then enlighten me. For a moment, Ruby thought Catherine might actually confess. Instead, the woman's expression hardened into something ugly and calculating. Travis Byrne ruins everything he touches, Catherine said venomously. He destroyed my brother's company, cost him everything, drove him to bankruptcy. Cameron took his own life rather than face the shame of what Travis did to him. Ruby felt her anger falter, replaced by shock. Catherine, so yes, I've been watching you. Yes, I wanted to see Travis suffer the way my brother suffered. I wanted him to lose something precious, something irreplaceable. Catherine's voice cracked with grief and rage. But then you went and fell in love with him anyway, despite everything I'd tried to do to keep you apart. Your brother was worth 10 of Travis Byrne, Catherine snapped. And if I can't make Travis pay for what he did, at least I can make sure he doesn't get to be happy while my brother is dead. Ruby stared at this woman, this broken, grieving woman who'd let her pain turn into something poisonous and destructive. Destroying Travis won't bring your brother back. No, Catherine agreed, her voice hollow, but it might help me sleep at night. She turned toward the car, then paused. The offer stands, Ms. Bailey. Take the money and disappear, or I'll make sure everyone you care about pays the price for your selfishness. Catherine got into the car and drove away, leaving Ruby standing on the sidewalk with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She had answers now. She knew who was threatening her and why, but she also knew that the danger wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning, because Catherine Walsh wasn't going to stop until she'd destroyed either Travis or everyone Ruby loved. And Ruby Bailey was going to have to decide which price she was willing to pay for love. Ruby's hands were shaking as she dialed Travis's number. She'd been staring at her phone for 20 minutes, sitting in the back room of the cafe while Keisha handled the afternoon customers, trying to find the words for what she needed to say. How did you tell someone you'd pushed away that you'd been wrong? How did you ask for forgiveness when you weren't sure you deserved it? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Ruby was about to hang up when Travis's voice came through the line, carefully neutral. "Hello, Ruby?" Just hearing him say her name made her chest ache. "Travis, I need to see you. There's something you need to know about Catherine Walsh." Silence stretched between them, and Ruby could practically feel Travis processing the name, the implications. "Where are you?" he asked finally, and Ruby heard something change in his voice. Urgency, concern, fear. The cafe. But Travis, she threatened Jasmine and Mia. "She knows where they work, where Mia goes to school." "Stay exactly where you are," Travis interrupted, his voice sharp with command. "Don't go anywhere alone. Don't let Keisha leave you, and don't open the door for anyone you don't know. I'm on my way." "Travis." "Ruby." His voice softened, and for a moment she heard the man who'd held her in his arms, who'd whispered her name like a prayer. "I'm coming for you. Just hold on." The line went dead, leaving Ruby clutching her phone and trying to steady her breathing. Outside the back room, she could hear the familiar sounds of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversation, the gentle jazz music she'd chosen because Travis had noticed it. 15 minutes later, the cafe door chimed, and Ruby heard Keisha's voice say, "She's in the back." Travis appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd run the entire way. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there was something wild in his eyes that spoke of barely controlled panic. "Are you hurt?" he asked, crossing the small space in 2 strides and reaching for her face with gentle hands. Ruby leaned into his touch, feeling tears she'd been holding back for a week finally spill over. "I'm okay, but Travis, I'm so sorry. The things I said to you." "Don't," he said firmly, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "We can talk about that later. Right now I need you to tell me everything Catherine said to you." Ruby told him about the bribe, the threats to her family, Catherine's confession about her brother Cameron. With each detail, Travis's expression grew darker, more dangerous. "Cameron Walsh," he said quietly when she finished. "I remember that deal. But Ruby, Catherine's lying about what happened." "What do you mean?" Travis pulled out his phone, scrolling through files with practiced efficiency. "Cameron Walsh was laundering money through his construction company. When my investigators found evidence of fraud, I had a choice: expose him publicly or give him a chance to come clean and make restitution quietly." He handed Ruby the phone, showing her a series of emails. "I chose the quiet option. I offered him a settlement that would have let him keep his reputation and most of his assets. He would have faced some financial penalties, but nothing that would have ruined him." Ruby read the emails, seeing Travis's attempts to reach out, to offer compromise, to handle the situation with discretion. "What happened?" He refused, said he'd rather burn it all down than admit wrongdoing. Travis's voice was heavy with old grief. 2 weeks later, the story broke in the financial press. I never found out who leaked it, but by then, Cameron had already transferred his assets offshore and disappeared. And then he killed himself, yes. But not because I destroyed him, Ruby, because he chose destruction over accountability. And when the consequences caught up with him, he couldn't face them. Ruby stared at the phone, understanding dawning. Catherine doesn't know. Catherine doesn't want to know. It's easier to blame me than to accept that her brother made choices that led to his own downfall. Travis took his phone back, his expression grim. But that doesn't make her any less dangerous. If she's been stalking you for weeks, if she's willing to threaten your family, she's not going to stop, Ruby finished. Not until she destroys you or everyone I love. Then we need to end this. Tonight. Ruby looked up at him, seeing the determination in his storm-gray eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not just love, though God knew she loved him more than she'd ever thought possible, but trust. Complete, unwavering trust in this man who'd tried to protect her, even when she'd pushed him away. "What do you want me to do?" Travis's smile was fierce and proud. "I want you to help me save the people we both love." The plan was simple, which Ruby hoped meant it would work. Travis called Catherine, telling her he wanted to meet, that he was ready to discuss ending his relationship with Ruby in exchange for guarantees about her safety. Catherine, probably sensing victory, agreed to meet at Byrne Investments after hours, when the building would be empty. What Catherine didn't know was that Ruby would be there too, hidden, recording everything, and that Travis's security team would be monitoring every word. "This is insane," Ruby whispered as they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor of Travis's building. "What if she doesn't confess? What if she just tries to hurt you?" "Then we'll deal with that too," Travis said, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "But Ruby, I need you to promise me something." If this goes wrong, if Catherine becomes violent, you run. You don't try to help me, you don't try to be a hero, you get to safety and call the police. Ruby wanted to argue, but the look in Travis's eyes stopped her. Okay, promise me. I promise. The elevator dinged softly as they reached Travis's floor. The offices were dark except for the security lighting, creating shadows that seemed to move and shift as they walked toward Travis's corner office. She's here, Travis murmured, nodding toward the reception area where a figure sat waiting. Ruby ducked into the conference room across the hall, leaving the door cracked so she could hear. Travis had given her a small recording device, which she activated with trembling fingers. "Catherine," Travis said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet space. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would actually show up," Catherine replied. "I thought your little coffee shop girl might have talked you out of it." "Ruby and I are over," Travis said, and even though Ruby knew he was lying, the words still hurt. "You made your point very effectively." "Did I? Because my sources tell me she refused the money I offered her. That suggests a level of attachment that might be problematic." Ruby heard footsteps, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. "What exactly do you want from me, Catherine?" Travis asked. "Justice," Catherine said simply. "You destroyed my brother's life. You drove him to suicide, and you've never faced any consequences for it." "Your brother destroyed his own life," Travis replied, his voice gentle but firm. "I tried to help him, Catherine. I offered him a way out that would have preserved his dignity and his future." "Liar," Catherine spat. "Cameron told me what you did, how you threatened him, how you made it impossible for him to fight back." "Is that what he told you?" "Because I have emails, Catherine. Documentation of every conversation we had. Cameron refused help because he thought he could outsmart everyone, including the federal investigators who were already closing in on him." "You're lying." "I'm not. And deep down, you know I'm not. You've spent 2 years blaming me because it's easier than accepting that your brother made terrible choices." Ruby heard the sound of something slamming, a hand on a desk, maybe a chair being knocked over. "He was a good man." Catherine's voice was rising, cracking with grief and fury. "He was a man who made mistakes," Travis said quietly. "Terrible mistakes that hurt a lot of people. But Catherine, destroying me won't bring him back. Hurting Ruby won't ease your pain. It will just create more suffering." "You don't get to lecture me about suffering," Catherine said, her voice venomous. "You sit in your tower, making billions, while families like mine are destroyed by your greed." "Then let's talk about greed," Travis said, and Ruby heard something change in his tone, steel beneath the gentleness. "Let's talk about how you've been embezzling money from Byrne Investments for the past 18 months. How you've been using company resources to stalk an innocent woman. How you've been threatening civilians to satisfy your need for revenge." Silence. Then, "You can't prove anything, can't I? Ruby, you can come out now." Ruby's heart hammered as she opened the conference room door and stepped into the main office area. Catherine whirled around, her face a mask of rage and betrayal. "You," she hissed. "Hello, Catherine," Ruby said, proud that her voice was steady. "I've been recording everything, including your confession about stalking me and threatening my family." Catherine's hand moved toward her purse, and Travis stepped between her and Ruby, his body a protective shield. "Don't," he said quietly. "It's over, Catherine. The police are already on their way. My security team has been watching this entire conversation. You can surrender peacefully, or you can make this worse for yourself." Catherine looked between them, her carefully composed mask finally cracking completely. Ruby saw her then not as a monster, but as a broken woman who'd let grief consume her, until there was nothing left but the need for someone else to hurt as much as she did. "He was all I had," Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "After our parents died, Cameron was all I had left. And when he... I know," Ruby said softly, taking a step closer despite Travis's protective stance. "I know what it feels like to lose someone you love, but Catherine, this isn't what Cameron would have wanted for you." "You don't know what he would have wanted," Catherine snapped, but the fight was going out of her. "You're right," Ruby agreed. "But I know what my family would want for me if something happened to them. They'd want me to live, to love, to find peace. Not to destroy myself trying to destroy someone else." Catherine stared at her for a long moment, and Ruby thought she might have gotten through to her. Then sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, and Catherine's expression hardened again. "This isn't over," she said, looking directly at Travis. "Even if I can't finish this, someone else will. You've made too many enemies, hurt too many people. Someday someone will make you pay." "Maybe," Travis said quietly. But not today, and not by hurting innocent people. The elevator dinged, and Ruby heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway, security, police, the cavalry arriving just as Travis had promised they would. Catherine Walsh was arrested quietly, professionally, led away in handcuffs while Ruby and Travis gave their statements. As the police car disappeared into the Chicago night, Ruby found herself standing alone with Travis on the steps of his building, the city lights twinkling around them like stars. "It's really over?" she asked. "It's really over," Travis confirmed. "Catherine will face charges for stalking, embezzlement, and making terroristic threats. She'll get the help she needs, but she won't be bothering you again." Ruby nodded, then looked up at him. This man who'd protected her, who'd fought for her, who'd forgiven her even when she hadn't forgiven herself. "Travis," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" Ruby took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I love you. I've been in love with you since that first night we talked in the rain, and I'm sorry I was scared. Sorry I pushed you away. Sorry I said those terrible things." Travis stepped closer, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Ruby Bailey," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you have nothing to apologize for. You were protecting yourself, protecting your family. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. So what happens now?" Travis smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in a week. "Now we go home, and tomorrow we start figuring out what the rest of our lives look like together." "Together, if you'll have me," Travis said, leaning down to rest his forehead against hers. "Because, Ruby, I meant what I said before. You're not a weakness to be exploited. You're not a liability to be managed. You're the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Ruby's answer was to pull him down for a kiss that tasted like forgiveness, like hope, like the promise of every dream they'd build together. And as they stood there in the Chicago night, holding each other close, Ruby realized that some dreams didn't just come true. Sometimes they became something even better than you'd ever dared to imagine. Ruby woke up to the sound of rain against the windows and the warm weight of Travis's arm around her waist. 3 months had passed since Catherine's arrest, 3 months of rebuilding trust and learning what it meant to love someone completely, without fear or reservation. 3 months of Travis showing up at the cafe every morning at 8:47, not because he needed coffee, but because he needed to see her smile. 3 months of falling asleep in each other's arms and waking up knowing that this beautiful, complicated, perfect thing between them was real and lasting and worth fighting for. "Good morning, beautiful," Travis murmured against her neck, his voice still rough with sleep. Ruby smiled, turning in his arms to face him. Even in the grey morning light filtering through her apartment windows, he was gorgeous. Hair mussed from sleep, stubble shadowing his jaw, storm-grey eyes soft with contentment. "Good morning yourself," she said, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. "Don't you have that big investor conference today?" "Actually," Travis said, his arms tightening around her with a mysterious smile, "I cancelled all my meetings today. We have somewhere very important to be." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "We do? Since when?" "Since I realized that the most important business I have to attend to involves the woman I'm madly in love with." Travis's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Pack a bag, Ruby. We're going on a trip." "A trip? Travis, I can't just... I have work and Jasmine needs help with Mia and..." "Already handled," Travis interrupted, pulling her closer. "Keisha is covering the cafe. Jasmine has the weekend off to spend with Mia, and your passport is valid." Ruby's heart skipped. "My passport? Travis, what are you planning?" Instead of answering, Travis reached for his phone on the nightstand, his fingers dancing across the screen before he handed it to her. "Do you remember telling me about this place? About how you'd always dreamed of going there someday?" Ruby looked at the screen and felt her breath stop entirely. It was a photograph of the most beautiful coastal villa she'd ever seen. White stone terraces cascading down to azure water, olive groves stretching into rolling hills, the kind of place that existed only in dreams and travel magazines. "Tuscany," she whispered. "The Amalfi Coast, specifically. The villa where your grandmother honeymooned in 1952. Travis was watching her face intently. "You told me about her letters, about how she described it as the most magical place on earth, about how you'd kept that old postcard she sent and promised yourself you'd go there someday." Ruby stared at the image, remembering the conversation from weeks ago. She'd been telling Travis about her grandmother's stories, about the love letters Grandma Rose had written from Italy, about the faded postcard that Ruby still kept in her jewelry box. She hadn't even realized he'd been listening so carefully. "Travis, this is incredible, but we can't just... Italy? It's so expensive and so far and..." "Ruby," Travis said softly, taking her hands in his. "Do you trust me?" "Of course I do." "Then trust me when I tell you that you deserve this. You deserve to see the places that inspired your grandmother's greatest love story. You deserve to walk the same paths she walked, to see the same sunsets that made her write those beautiful letters about finding magic in the world." Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. Her grandmother had been her greatest inspiration, the woman who'd taught her to believe in true love, even when the world seemed determined to prove it didn't exist. But why now? Why this? Travis's smile grew tender, vulnerable. "Because I realized something these past few months. I've spent my entire adult life building wealth, accumulating things, creating security, but I've never actually lived, Ruby. I've never done something just because it was beautiful or romantic, or because it would make someone I love smile." He cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "You've taught me how to dream again, how to see beauty in simple moments, how to believe that some things are more important than business deals and profit margins." Travis's voice grew rough with emotion. "I want to give you the world, Ruby. Starting with the place that meant the most to the woman who taught you how to love." Ruby's heart felt so full, she thought it might burst. "When would we leave?" "Our flight is in 6 hours, Travis said, his grin becoming boyish and excited. "I have a car coming to pick us up in 2 hours. The villa is ours for a week, the same villa where your grandmother stayed, overlooking the same bay, where she and your grandfather promised to love each other forever. You found the exact same villa. I may have made some calls, pulled some strings, made a very generous donation to the local historical society." Travis's eyes twinkled with mischief. "The current owners were very understanding when I explained about your grandmother's connection to the place." Ruby launched herself into his arms, kissing him with all the love and gratitude and pure joy flooding through her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I can't believe you did this," she whispered. "Believe it. And Ruby," Travis's voice grew serious, tender, "this is just the beginning. I want to take you everywhere your heart desires. I want to show you the northern lights in Iceland, the cherry blossoms in Japan, the most beautiful libraries in the world. I want to fill your life with so much beauty and adventure that you never stop smiling." "Why?" Ruby asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Because you've given me something more valuable than all the money in the world," Travis said simply. "You've given me a reason to live instead of just existing. You've shown me what it means to share a life with someone, to want their happiness more than your own success." Ruby felt fresh tears spill over. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." "Good," Travis murmured, pulling her close again, "because I plan to spend the rest of our lives terrifying you with how much I love you. Starting with this trip, where I'm going to spoil you absolutely rotten and show you exactly how a Bailey woman deserves to be treated. Is that all this trip is about? Spoiling me?" Travis's smile turned mysterious again, and Ruby caught something in his expression that made her heart race. "Well, there might be one other thing I have planned." "What kind of thing?" "The kind of thing that requires the perfect sunset, the most romantic setting in the world, and a question I've been dying to ask you since the night you first let me hold you in my arms." Ruby's breath caught as understanding dawned. "Travis, pack light, beautiful," he said, kissing her nose softly. "We have a plane to catch and a lifetime of adventures to begin." As Ruby rushed to pack, her heart singing with joy and anticipation, she thought about her grandmother's letters describing the magic of Italy, the way true love could transform even the most ordinary moments into something extraordinary. And she realized that Travis wasn't just taking her to see where her grandmother's love story had flourished. He was taking her there to begin their own. Ruby felt her heart swell until it seemed too big for her chest. "Travis, I love you, Ruby Bailey. I love your strength, your compassion, your ability to see magic in the simplest moments. I love the way you make me want to be better, to feel deeper, to live instead of just existing." He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. "And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how extraordinary you are." Ruby was crying now, happy tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You taught me how to dream again," Travis said simply. "You showed me that the most valuable thing in life isn't what you own, it's who you love and how deeply you love them." Ruby kissed him then, pouring all of her gratitude and love and pure joy into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, She rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "So when do we leave for this magical mystery trip?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "In about an hour," Travis said, and Ruby could hear the smile in his voice. "Our bags are already packed. I may have borrowed some clothes from your closet with Jasmine's help. She's very excited about this plan, by the way." Ruby pulled back to stare at him. "Jasmine knows about this too? She helped me pick out the perfect dress for you to wear at dinner tonight. Something about Italian sunset appropriate and romantic enough to make him speechless." Travis's grin was boyish and excited. "She also made me promise to take lots of pictures." Ruby laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "You're incredible. Absolutely, completely incredible." "I'm a man in love who wants to give his woman the world," Travis said softly, "starting with the place where love stories are born." Ruby looked around her small bedroom, the same room where she'd woken up confused and aching after their first night together, wondering if love like this could possibly be real. Now she knew it wasn't just real. It was transformative. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes to Italy, yes to adventures, yes to building a beautiful life together." Travis's smile was radiant as he pulled her close again. "There's one more thing I should mention about this trip." "More surprises, Travis? I don't think my heart can take any more surprises." "This one involves a very important question," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief and something deeper, something that looked like forever. "One that requires the perfect setting, the most romantic place on earth, and a woman who's brave enough to say yes to forever." Ruby's breath caught as understanding dawned. "Travis, but that's a surprise for later," he said, kissing her nose softly. "Right now, we have a plane to catch and a love story to begin." Ruby felt her heart race with anticipation and joy. "I can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Travis murmured, holding her close. "Because this is just the beginning of our forever, Ruby Bailey, and I plan to make every moment of it extraordinary." 2 hours later, as they sat in first class with Italy stretching ahead of them, and Ruby's hand clasped firmly in Travis's, she thought about her grandmother's letters, about true love and magic, and the courage it took to say yes to both. Outside the airplane window, clouds drifted by like dreams, and Ruby smiled, knowing that somewhere ahead, in a villa overlooking the same bay where her grandmother had found love, her own happily ever after was waiting. "Ready for an adventure?" Travis asked, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "With you?" Ruby smiled, her heart full of love and anticipation. "I'm ready for anything." And she was. 1 year later, Villa Rosa, Amalfi Coast, Italy. Ruby had never seen anything more beautiful than the sunset painting the Mediterranean in shades of gold and crimson. She stood on the ancient stone terrace of Villa Rosa, the same terrace where her grandmother had stood 70 years ago, watching the same sun dip toward the same endless horizon. The villa was exactly as Grandma Rose had described in her letters: white stone walls draped in bougainvillea, olive trees whispering in the evening breeze, and a view that seemed to stretch into eternity itself. "Your grandmother had exquisite taste," Travis said softly, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Ruby leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her spine. She always said this place was where she learned what real love looked like. And what did it look like? Ruby smiled, remembering the faded ink of her grandmother's letters, the passionate words about finding someone who saw beauty in the same things you did, who wanted to share every sunset and every dream. "Like this," she said simply, "like finding someone who brings out the best in you, who makes you brave enough to dream bigger than you ever thought possible." Travis's arms tightened around her. "Like finding someone who makes ordinary moments feel extraordinary." Exactly like that. They'd spent the week exploring the coastline, wandering through vineyards and small coastal towns, eating pasta and gelato until they were dizzy with happiness. Travis had been right. Ruby had never felt more alive than she did here, far from the familiar routines of Chicago, discovering parts of herself she'd forgotten existed, but it was the quiet moments she treasured most. Morning coffee on this very terrace, watching fishing boats dot the horizon like prayers, afternoon naps tangled together while the Mediterranean sun streamed through gauze curtains, evening walks through the villa's gardens, where jasmine and lavender perfumed the air, and Travis told her stories about all the places he wanted to take her next. "Ruby," Travis said now, his voice carrying a note she'd never heard before, nervous, hopeful, trembling with possibility. She turned in his arms and her breath caught. Travis was looking at her the way he had that first night in her apartment, like she was something precious and impossible, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "There's something I need to tell you," he continued, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Something I've been thinking about since the moment we arrived here." "What is it?" Travis stepped back, and Ruby watched in amazement as he dropped to one knee on the same terrace where her grandparents had pledged their love decades ago. In his hands was a ring box, not the one from her imagination, but something even more perfect. Antique gold that caught the sunset light, delicate and timeless and absolutely ruby. "Ruby Bailey," Travis said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "A year ago you were serving coffee to a man who had forgotten how to dream. You could have seen just another customer, just another suit, just another person passing through your day." Ruby felt tears start to fall, but she didn't care. This moment, this perfect, impossible moment, deserved every tear of joy she could cry. "Instead you saw me," Travis continued, "the real me underneath all the walls and the fear and the belief that I had to earn love instead of simply accepting it. You saw someone worth fighting for, someone worth forgiving, someone worth building a life with. Travis, you taught me that love isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up, being present, choosing each other every single day." He opened the ring box, revealing a stone that seemed to capture the very essence of the Italian sunset. "It's about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself, not because you have to, but because they make you believe you're worthy of that kind of love." Ruby was sobbing now, happy tears streaming down her face, as the man she loved more than her own life knelt before her with the Mediterranean as their witness. "Ruby Bailey, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are? Will you travel the world with me, build dreams with me, grow old with me in a house full of laughter and love and the kind of happiness your grandmother wrote about in her letters?" Ruby looked down at this beautiful man, this unexpected love, who'd turned her entire world upside down in the best possible way. She thought about her grandmother's letters, about true love and courage and the magic that happened when two people decided to build a life together. "Yes," she whispered, then louder as Travis slipped the perfect ring onto her finger. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Travis rose and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as the Italian sunset painted them both in gold. When he set her down, his kiss was soft and sweet and full of promises, for tomorrow and next year and all the adventures still to come. "I love you, Ruby Byrne-to-be," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Travis Byrne. More than coffee, more than dreams, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, holding each other close while the first stars appeared in the deepening sky. Ruby thought about the night she'd woken up with his mark on her neck, convinced she'd dreamed the most perfect evening of her life. She'd been so afraid it wasn't real, so scared to believe that love like this could actually exist. Now she knew better. Love like this, deep, transformative, unshakable love, wasn't a dream at all. It was the most beautiful reality of all. As they walked back toward the villa hand in hand, Ruby caught a glimpse of something that made her heart skip. There on the small table where they'd shared dinner every evening was an envelope addressed in her grandmother's familiar handwriting. "Travis, what is this?" Travis's smile was mysterious and tender. "Something your grandmother left for you. The villa's owners found it in her old room, along with instructions that it should be given to her granddaughter when she came here with the man she planned to marry." Ruby's hands shook as she opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper covered in her grandmother's elegant script. "My dearest Ruby, if you're reading this, then you've found what I found in this magical place, a love worth crossing oceans for. I always knew you had the courage to open your heart completely, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Remember this moment, sweetheart. Remember how it feels to be loved so completely that you forget to be afraid. Remember that the best adventures in life aren't the places you go, they're the people you choose to go there with. Love bravely, dream boldly, and never forget that you deserve every moment of happiness coming your way. All my love, Grandma Rose P.S. I hid a bottle of champagne behind the loose stone in the garden wall. I always hoped someone would find a reason to celebrate here." Ruby looked up at Travis through tears of pure joy. She knew, somehow, she knew. She knew because she raised an extraordinary woman who was always destined for an extraordinary love, Travis said softly, "just like the love she found here with your grandfather." As they sat together on the terrace, sharing the champagne her grandmother had hidden decades ago, Ruby realized that this wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of everything. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life begin with a single moment of courage. The courage to believe that love like this can be real, that dreams can come true, and that we all deserve to be loved as deeply and completely as Ruby and Travis love each other. Their story reminds us that true love doesn't just happen to us. It transforms us, inspires us to become the best version of ourselves, and shows us that some dreams are worth every risk. What would you have done if someone offered you a choice between safety and the greatest love of your life? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.